Most people don't realise that there's been a revolution in the cheese-making industry in this country. We've got a lot of small makers have started up, and they're making some fantastic cheeses. There's over 700 named cheeses now being made throughout the UK.
700 cheeses throughout the UK, that's incredible. I think we're probably giving the French a run for their money, aren't we?
Well, it's always difficult to make those comparisons because quite often the cheeses are very similar, but they have a different name, which is why we talk about different named cheeses rather than different types of cheese.
Right.
Because there's probably only half a dozen different types of cheese.
And we were talking particularly about blue cheese today. You were saying there are over 70 named blue cheeses in the UK.
There are indeed, and I guess this is really strange because blue cheese only accounts for somewhere in the region of 2 to 3% of the total cheese market.
Right.
And yet new producers have set up and started to make their own blue cheeses, which is really quite surprising because they're very, very difficult cheeses to make.
Right.
But the array is wonderful. They're all slightly different.
Yeah.
And I guess when a new cheesemaker starts up, he has got to be doing something different from other people. There's no point doing exactly the same. So they set out to make slightly different textures, slightly different degrees of bluing.
Yeah.
Some are a bit creamier, some are held a bit more longer than others, some a bit shorter.
Yeah.
Different shapes, even different colours, adding a bit of colour to the cheese, putting a different coloured wax around the cheese. All of these things add variety and eye appeal, as well as altering the taste. So there's a huge amount that makers can do to differentiate their products one from another.
And we're obviously eating more cheese.
We are, although the surprising thing is that if you look at a league table of cheese consumers, the UK is languishing really towards the bottom of that. We get through, on average, about 11 kilograms of cheese per person per year. Which sounds a lot, but it's equivalent to about 1 ounce or 30 grams per person per day. And that includes things like fromage frais, which you and I perhaps wouldn't regard as cheese.
I would think of it as a yoghurt, really, rather than...
But the statisticians do include it as a cheese.
Right.
If you compare that with some of our European counterparts, for example, Germany, France, Italy, Greece, are all getting through about 22 to 23 kilograms, more than double our consumption. And in the rest of the EU, even in some of the newer EU members in Eastern Europe, they're consuming more cheese per person than we get through in the UK.
Do you think that's because of the way we actually tackle cheese and eat it? I'm thinking about the fact that we tend to cook with it and have it in sandwiches rather than have it at the end of a meal, for example.
Well, I think that's the same in the rest of Europe as well. I think one of the reasons that I've looked at over the years is that if you look at what different countries consume, we have a very high consumption in this country of snacky-type foods. So things like biscuits, cakes, chocolates, crisps, extruded snacks, sweets, and all of that. We are way ahead of our European colleagues. And yet we're very low consumers of cheese. We're low consumers of meat, of bread, of fish, of fresh fruit and vegetables.
We like our sort of things that are actually bad for us.
Well, yeah, the sweeter and savoury things, and maybe where there isn't so much meal preparation involved. But what we're seeing in this country now is, perhaps because of the recession, perhaps because of all of the fantastic cookery programs that are out there, we are seeing a slow switch back to people cooking from scratch.
That's true, and cheese is one of those
fresh ingredients, local ingredients, and creating their own meals, not necessarily taking hours to do it, but trying to find quick meal solutions for their family within their busy lifestyle.
I can't help but agree with that. I call myself the time short foodie because that's literally, you're describing me there. Can I ask you one more thing, Nigel? In terms of the best way to eat cheese and how to treat it, we were talking about temperature and things. How would you advise people to get the very best out of eating a cheese?
It's very simple. Most people, quite rightly, keep their fridge, the cheese.
Yep.
And they've probably got it wrapped. They should have it wrapped so you don't get contamination between one cheese and another. Otherwise, your blue cheese will end up getting white mould and your cheddar will get blue mould. So keep them well wrapped, separate from each other.
And above the meat, anything, right on the top of the fridge, I keep mine.
Well, bottom of the fridge is even cooler.
Right.
And that's fine. But the trick then is get it out the fridge a couple of hours before you're going to eat it, especially if it's for a cheese board. Mm-hmm. Unwrap it, loosely so that it can breathe, and as the temperature goes up, so the flavours develop.
Yeah.
And I'm always amazed. I do lots of sampling with consumers, and I give them the cheese, and they say, fantastic cheese, where do you buy it? And I say, I bought it from the local supermarket down the road. So, but I go there, and my cheese doesn't taste anything like that. And then we find out that they keep it in the fridge, they serve it straight from the fridge.
So keep it up to warm temperature. Nigel, you've been absolutely fantastic with all that information. I wish I could talk a lot longer, but I can't. So thank you very much for your help and for your advice.
Can I suggest, Vanessa, that if your listeners want more information about cheese, how to look after it, the different varieties, there's a lovely website called BritishCheese.com, which contains lots of useful information.